everyone varies in what they do. They vary in their talent levels. But they have one common denominator that they share. They are all superlative in their preparation. They all dare to prepare. And the question I have now is, can I dare you to prepare? Can I have you move? You all prepare. You're intuitive preparers. But can I have you take it to the next level? Well, maybe before I answer that question, I ought to ask you one other question. Anybody take a flight and you're on that plane and you hit violent storms? We hit some yesterday coming out here, and you say to yourself, you know, the plane, could it go down? Did it ever happen to you? You know, you grab the seat and you're sort of white-knuckled, and then the plane really bucks and jumps and someone moans and you go like this, and you look for a flight attendant and you see or fear in their eyes. Now, the good news is we're all here to talk about it, right? And what you may not know is a little-known story. A little-known story about a man named Major Ployer P. Hill. He's the test pilot who tested planes before World War II. He flew the Flying Fortress for Boeing, an amazing plane in World War II. He took it up on a beautiful day like today in 1935, got up to 300 or 400 feet, banked left, and then the plane crashed. It suddenly hurtled to the ground and crashed and exploded, killing him. Sad story. But from that story came a benefit. Because at that time, the airline industry decided that it was necessary for pilots, no matter how experienced, to use a pilot's checklist. You see, a crew member forgot to release the rudder lock and the elevator lock on that flight. And so the FAA mandated, no matter how experienced you are, pilot's checklist. You know, you've gotten on a plane. You look up front and you say, hey, those pilots, they're reading an instruction manual. You know, can they fly this plane? But they're checking off the list because they want to fly you right and want to fly you safely. And so that pilot's checklist is what we advocate and dare to prepare. We change it. We call it the preparation checklist. We simplify it. It's only 8 steps. But the point is, if you can embrace that kind of methodical preparation in the way you do things, you will pilot yourselves more successfully in the challenges you face in an ever-changing television entertainment industry. I mean, change every day. So that's what we talk about. Now, before I get to the pilot's checklist and its methodical approach, I ought to address something that I know a number of you are thinking right now. You're saying to yourselves, hey, Ron's not telling us anything we don't know. We all know we should prepare. I mean, that's what it's all about. We all know that we're more confident if we prepare. We're more successful if we prepare. Well, maybe it comes down to what I heard Ben Bernanke, the head of the Fed, saying about balancing the budget recently. He said, it's sort of like getting into heaven. You know, everyone wants to do it, but nobody wants to do what you have to do to get there. Well, I want you to think about that for a moment, because one of the things that fascinates me as I go around the world training companies, training executives, training leaders, is a certain resistance. And I get excuses. Think for a moment. What do you think are the primary excuses that people raise when you say, take your preparation to a whole new level? What are the major excuses? Well, you hit it. Time. People say, I know how to do this. I don't have time. I've done it before. By the way, I'm an expert on these because I've committed every one of these sins. And when I write books, I don't write about my 100 success stories and how great I am. I write about what I learned from my mistakes, and I've learned from the mistakes I've made in each of these areas. Let me just pick one, for example, because I've heard you jump at it right away, and that is the time one. You know, we all get busier and busier in our jobs, and when people ask us to do new things, we say, I don't have time. You know, maybe you could join what I could have been president of somewhat earlier in my career. Anyone here could join the multitaskers club, you know? You know how it is. I remember I used to drive to work and used to drive to the station where Steve and Arnie worked, and I, you know, wanted to go visit. But as I would drive, I had a newspaper on the passenger seat. You know, got to a red light, read the newspaper. The only problem was when the light turned green, I was still reading, you know, and driving along the way. I was trying to do 2 things at once. Or how many of you have your Blackberries on right now? Don't tell me. But, you know, you put it on vibrate in a meeting, And you say, oh, they won't hear it if it goes off, but it goes, and you start going, you get that little itch in your hip. You're to do two things at once, and your mind's wandering, and you're drifting from what you should do. Or, hey, do you ever call somebody's office? You could have called mine some years ago, and you hear, on the computer, they're banging away the next script. They're banging away the next proposal. They're doing two things at once. By the way, there is adequate research out there for the fact that if you multitask, you may think you're more efficient, but you will make more mistakes. You will spend more time correcting those mistakes. And folks, it's not a matter of saving time. It's a matter of expending more time in order to do redos. And we want to avoid that. So the excuse, I don't have time, is something we have to lay aside, just as we have to get rid of, I know how to do this and I've done it before. We all say it. We know how to do our jobs. We've done it 20 times before. But then I think of the great president. We're in this great political time right now, Harry Truman, and what he once said, and I want you to remember this. He said, it's what you learn after you know it all that really counts. It's what you learn after you know it all that really counts. That is something that we have to make ourselves vulnerable daily to be better as we move ahead. So don't forget it. Now, even if we're able to get rid of these excuses, you're going to come to me if I kind of push this checklist on you or the methodical preparation. You're going to say, well, Ron, just generally, you got to know what it's like to work for Steve Moscow. It's pressure. I got pressure on me all the time. Well, when I think of pressure, I think of the story. You heard the story of the duck that went into the pet store and waddled on up to the pet store owner and said to the pet store owner, you got any duck food? And the pet store owner said, no, I don't have any duck food. And the duck said, thank you very much, and waddled on out the door. Next day, the duck came back and waddled on up to the pet store owner and said, do you have any duck food? And the pet store owner said, no, I don't have any duck food. Duck said, thank you very much, and waddled on out the door. The next day, the duck waddles on up to the pet store owner and says to the pet store owner, do you have any duck food? And the pet store owner looks at him and says, are you the same duck that was in here yesterday and the day before asking for duck food? And the duck says, yes, sir. Did I tell you we didn't have any duck food? And the duck says, yes, sir. Well, you see those web feet of yours? If you come back here again asking for duck food, I'm going to nail those web feet of yours to the floor. The duck says, thank you very much, and waddles on out the door. Duck comes back the next day, waddles on up to the pet store owner and says, do you have any nails? No. Do you have any duck food? Well, that duck certainly knew how to handle pressure. Now, how do you handle pressure? How do you react to challenges when you're under? What takes over in your life? You know the words. If you're under pressure, you revert to habits. Habits or instincts take over, correct? Well, then you got to think of the other old saw, and that is, if the only tool you have in your toolbox is a hammer, then every problem's going to look like a nail. So if the only tools you have in your toolbox are built on your instinct and habits to do something a certain way, then every problem is going to kind of repeat itself that way, and you're in that circle that keeps going round and round. And I can tell you, when you get to be my age, you want to continue to enjoy life. At your age, and for every age subsequent, you want to enjoy life. And it's by raising the bar, by overcoming those habits, by putting more tools in your toolbox, that life is more fun and you're more effective. And that takes us back to this pilot's checklist. Daring to prepare is about methodical preparation and putting a preparation checklist in your toolbox to raise your effectiveness in what you do. Now, maybe I should get